if we had just a little bit more understanding about each other, we wouldn't be at war.
The United States as a whole, or the Western world as a whole, is a PR project. It's a PR project.
That's a very good way of putting it.
It is. One of the reasons why people want to move to the United States is because of the way that the United States sells itself to the world. The same media that has sold the United States in a certain way has sold African Americans to be the thugs.
Woo! That's fire. Whenever I see these Diaspora Wars break out, whether it's South Africa versus Nigeria, whether it's intra-country, intra-African, whenever I see breakout, I just say, yo, we're all suffering from the same trauma. So, well,
I love it.
Yeah, yes,
I love it. But I love the energy though, because
I was just waiting to it. Yes.
No, you're good.
Right, okay, so welcome to another episode of the Two Naija Girls podcast. I am one Naija girl, Cynthia, and we have our other Naija girl,
Jubilee. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So today we want to talk about a topic that's really close to my heart, because every time I've seen that happen, after gaining the knowledge that I have now, it just really triggers empathy in me, right? Because I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like if we had just a little bit more understanding about each other, we wouldn't be at war. And to that point, today we want to talk about Diaspora Wars. And when I say Diaspora Wars, we're talking about the African diaspora, everyone from back home to, Trinidad to, I just remembered something I'm going to share with you guys. But yeah, from Trinidad to Barbados to the Dominican Republic, Brazil, wherever the African diaspora exists right now. But I just remembered something. I think there was Diaspora Wars going on at some point on Twitter. And someone said something about how we are all one rice, right? So it's like, do you get it? So it's like we're all one race, but rice is one thing that brings all of us together. We don't play with rice. Like, I don't play with rice, man. Rice is big.
Listen. And the fact that you can make it in so many different ways.
Woo! Rice is that bitch. Rice is that girl, man. I don't play with. Sometimes I ate rice this morning, and sometimes I'm just like, thank God for rice, man. Like, what would I do without rice? You know what I mean?
And there's something about it. I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
I know bread is good too, but
bread is rice. But rice is that bitch.
Rice. There's something about rice. You want
rice
jollof rice?
You want
fried
jollof, fried,
rice?
with a bit of sauce on the side. Like, rice is that bitch. I have this joke. I always say, give a Nigerian tomato and rice, and they're okay for life. Just tomatoes. Like, in Nigeria will make 10 different dishes from tomatoes, and then we'll rice on the side, like they're made for life. And nothing else,
There's no need, because that one will just fight.
Right.
Fight. You mention everything else, we'll fight.
Right. So we're all on rice at the end of the day. Rice is one thing that brings us together. Whether you're in Jamaica or whether you're in, the Dominican Republic, we all eat rice and we enjoy rice. So that was a joke I saw that made me laugh and kind of warmed my heart at the same time. But anyways, I know that when I first moved to this country, I had a lot of African American people ask me, why don't you guys like us back home? And it surprised me. Did you have that experience moving here?
No, not really. But then also, I don't know, like, and it's not. I don't even think it's a bad thing, because I just don't know if I've had that many African American friends. Right?
Gotcha.
I've mostly met first generation Africans who are here and they've lived here their entire lives, but I've never really. I'm trying to really think about it. Like, all my friend groups that I've had, I don't think and it's not a conscious choice. I'm just realizing that's what, because as soon as you're talking, I start to think to myself, like, do I have an African American friend?
Yeah.
In that sense, I don't think so. At least friend where I can have those kind of conversations. Have I interacted and worked with African Americans? Yes, I have.
You know what's funny is that it didn't take that long for that conversation to come up. It didn't even take it didn't take intimacy. So with friendship, there's there's implied intimacy in friendship where people feel comfortable enough to ask. But it didn't take that. So I'll give you an example. I remember there was this job I was working. It was a startup, and so usually some startups, they create this very communal environment where they cook your food and stuff like that. So we had a chef who was African American, and he was the first person who asked me that question, who was like, why don't you guys like us back home? And I'm like, well, I didn't even know we didn't like you back home. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Like, I didn't know that was a thing, right? Yeah. But like I said, opening this episode, there's some things I maybe at that point I had enough knowledge to have forgotten what the perception of African Americans is back home, maybe. And so, and then he started talking about all the stuff, some derogatory terms in which Africans describe African Americans, derogatory ways in which they view African Americans. And that's what opened my eyes, like, that's interesting, right? Very. And then, of course, on the other side, on the African American side, there's this sometimes, and sometimes it's earned, because I feel like there are some high-profile African people, I'm not going to name any names, high-profile African people now living and working in the United States who sometimes say some problematic things, right?
I get it.
Who sometimes say some problematic things. One of the ones I've heard was how someone is an African elitist. Again, I'm not going to name any names. You and I know the person who said this, but I'm not going to name names. We both know who said it.
I want some tea.
He's a very popular person. He's a very popular person. But, calling themselves African elitists, and then I also have, so I had the benefit, and I call it a benefit because I had formed my personality before I moved here. So not a lot that was happening in terms of racial tensions, intra-African heritage tensions. It didn't impact my sense of myself, right? But I've also had the opportunity to talk to people who maybe went to high school here, who went to middle school here, of African heritage. And they talk about how they were also bullied in school by African American kids, right?
Yes. I mean, especially comedians have gone on now to, even, at least that's where I've seen it the most, where they talk about when they were kids here and how they were bullied in that sense.
Yep.
And so,
I've heard that. Something again, derogatory terms. African booty scratcher.
Booty scratcher.
African booty scratcher.
That's the most popular one that I know.
That's a very popular one.
Times.
Yes. And I one of my cousins told me she personally experienced that. Right. African Americans making fun of food, their food, and honestly, my response to that, because I always try to come from a place of empathy, my response to that is just, kids are mean. Kids are just mean, right? So it's I feel like kids come to that point in their life where they're trying to find themselves, right? And they just it's bullying in general. It's just you had that one thing, that one targeted thing they could bully you with. And again, that's not to minimize the experience of the Africans who went through that. But the only reason why I bring that up is a lot of Africans grow up with that. Again, because they experience that in their formative years. And so they grow up nursing that, and that also defines the way they start to see African Americans growing up, right? And I know I've heard a lot of Africans who grew up here also say, there's a lot of African Americans, the way they felt treated by a lot of African Americans is the way they feel like white people treat African Americans, right? Where, the white people are, tend to want to oppress the African Americans, and then African Americans tend to want to oppress African people. Right. So all these tensions, that's what I want us to really talk about today. I'm not sure what your experience has been. For me, I'm just a very naturally curious person. So even if I've not had a personal experience, one of the only personal experience I've had is I've had people come up to me and say, why don't you all like us? Right.
Yes. And what was your response to that?
I was confused. I was like, I didn't know we didn't like you. You know what I mean? I'm just hearing that for the first time, that we don't like you. Where did you get that impression that we don't like you? That was the question I asked, I remember there was another one who, a fashion designer I was working with, an African American fashion designer I was working with. This guy looked Ghanaian to me. Whole time I thought he was first generation because of how Ghanaian he looked to me. But he also was African American and had that impression that Africans didn't like them. And we got into a debate. And I remember one of the things I asked him was, do you know anything about colonialism? And he was like, no. I was like, and for me, that was like, there's that knowledge gap.
Yeah.
I think that
Absolutely.
understanding gap, I think that is, fostering these tensions where I know I learned about slavery, although I didn't know about slavery, about the transatlantic slave trade to the extent I know about it now, obviously. But I did learn about it in school because it's part of our history back home, right? So we touched on it in history class. But African Americans on this end don't know anything, or maybe it's just the educational system in general. I wouldn't know. I didn't go to school, high school here.
I think
it might be the educational system in general. Don't know anything about colonialism. So in the knowledge and minds of most people, based on the history they learn in the United States, if you don't go out of your way to learn your own history, is Africans were balling and enjoying while African Americans were being sold into slavery. Mm-hmm. So that's that gap, right? Where it's like, oh, we were partying back home, but it was like, no, it wasn't a ball back home. We were being colonized in our own homes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like we were being colonized in our own, in your own homes. Literally, you had these psychos who came in and are making you dress like them, making you imagine, think about it, making you dress like them. I mean white people. I mean the colonialists, right? Okay. Who came in making you dress like them, talk like them in your own home, right? Mm-hmm. While all that was happening as well, know. So, and then you've probably seen comedians, like you said. So you've seen comedians talk about their own experiences as Africans living in the United States, as African-born people living in the United States. But I've also heard comedians who are African-American also make fun of African people and talk about how African people should have saved them while, African Americans were being sold into, but it's like, again, is that knowledge, there's a knowledge gap there because we weren't having a ball back home either, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
No, I hear you.
Like I said, it's a sensitive topic. And the reason why we're mindful about what we say is because it's a sensitive topic. But yeah, let's hear you.
Yeah, but not just even mindful about it being sensitive. I think it's being mindful also not to spread misinformation.
Right.
As well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like we live in an era where misinformation is just like it's waiting for you outside your door. You just need to open that door and it's like in there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're also very careful with our words in terms of want to make sure that what we're saying is one, accurate, but not just that, but also personal to our experience, because we can that's the only place we can form an opinion from. Right. Yeah. So, well, not the only place, but for now, for this particular topic, that's where we can form our opinion from. The reason why I say all of this is I have always felt like, because first of all, the United States as a whole, or the Western world as a whole, is a PR project, right? It's a PR project.
That's a very good way of putting it. But yeah, I hear you.
One of the reasons why people want to move to the United States is because of the way that the United States sells itself to the world. Right? One of the reasons why when you were little growing up and you're watching all of these things and you're seeing the game shows, or you're seeing people living in perfect houses.
You're watching Friends. I think friendship is going to be like that.
You know what I mean? You're watching all of these things and it's so enticing to you. You're like, oh my God, I have to do like, it forces you to want to join that society, because in your mind, you're like, that looks great to me. They never show you, first of all, they ain't going to show you Skid Row.
True.
Nobody's going to show you that.
True that.
You know what I mean?
True that.
Nobody's going to show you police brutality. Now we're getting access to this information. Why? Because information is now just like at your fingertips.
At your fingertips, yes. To it. Technology.
But before,
that.
But before we knew that, or before we had all of this information, we didn't see it that way. So now, why am I bringing that as an example? The same media that has sold the United States in a certain way has sold African Americans to be the thugs.
Woo! To be that's fire.
The bad people. To be the ones who are doing the drugs. To be the ones who are selling the drugs. To be the ones who are on the streets.
The same media machine.
Because truly think about it. When you watch a lot of the old movies, when you see Black people in those movies, or you see African Americans, or whatever it is. I'm just gonna say black people,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's not just African Americans, right?
Yeah.
You just see they show you, it's always the hood, it's trashy.
Yes.
They're always, the wigs are not done right. They speak a
Yes.
certain way. They're not educated.
Yes.
They sell
Yes.
you this idea. So
Yes.
you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, like, if I go to America, I am definitely not gonna be hanging out with those people,
Right.
because
Yeah, the
I'm educated.
gang people. Yeah.
Yeah, but also I'm educated. I don't speak in the way that they speak. I
Yeah.
am one of the elites. I went to school, and Nigerians carry education as a. I'm
True.
using Nigeria as an example because
As an example.
because that's my experience.
That's our experience, right?
And so it's like, it's a badge of honor, which is a great thing, as you
Yeah.
should, right?
Yeah.
But then also it's like you said, then you move here, and then you realize, like, there's African American people in top positions. What are you talking about? That are so freaking educated that it's like, what are you talking about? We have Oprah Winfrey. Hello, like, you know what I mean? But this is like, before you get here, that's the information you get, and then when you're leaving, your parents are looking at you and saying, when you get there, stay away from these people. These are the kind of people that you should stay away. You know, don't trust black people. You see, a white man will always tell you the truth.
Let me laugh. Let me first cackle.
That's like scratch the center of my head, like.
You understand? Let me first cackle.
But I
Yeah.
appreciate,
Yeah.
and it does not go on to also say that all white people are bad people.
Right.
But we have a lot of bad white people. Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Who am I? If his name starts with T and ends with P, I did not say it.
Yep.
Somebody else did. I'm sorry.
Yep.
But moving
Yep.
on.
Yep.
That
That guy.
orange in color.
The only
I
orange
did
man
not
in the
say
whole
it.
world.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, you
Yep,
know,
yep.
if blasphemy was a thing. But anyways, you know
Yeah.
what? I digress because that topic can take me somewhere
Girl,
else.
phew, I am
The
like,
Lord has saved me, so let me come back on
yeah,
earth.
you're going to
Anyways,
have to take a
but-
deep breath. I'm not getting to that topic because there's something going on even
But-
right now that we could get into. But that's not the topic for today. Keep going.
And then, you know, the funny thing is, we're gonna wake up. May God, I want to say we're going to wake up months from now, and there will still be things to talk about. And say, may God release us from that
Is it
kind
not,
of tragedy.
my dear?
But
Is
that's
it-
okay. That's okay. That's for God now. We've put it in the hands of God.
A
But
circus
also,
show.
We'll
A freaking
hold it in
circus
our,
show.
We'll hold it in our hands. Okay, now what? See, this is the problem.
Now we're digressing.
Back to this
It's
topic.
so irksome.
So,
It's so irksome. But yeah, continue.
but you see, so all of these things that have been sold
Yeah.
truly to us.
That's
so
fire.
When you get here, it's so challenging. I don't want to say impossible,
Yeah.
but it's so challenging for you to connect on that level, because when you meet
Yeah.
an African American person, you're immediately thinking to yourself, like, oh my God, like, no, I don't want to
Yeah.
associate with
People we
in
see on
that
TV.
sense. And it's
Yeah.
just the lie that has been sold to us, just like, again,
Yeah.
colonialism, all of that was sold to us in that
Yes,
sense.
it's the same lie.
Again, it's the
Yep.
same lie that's been sold to us, right?
Yep.
And I love what you said. Then when you came here, you became more exposed to African Americans, because
Yep.
now you're working with them. You're
Yep,
spending
yep.
time. You're building friendships with them.
Yep.
And so you're beginning to realize, like, wait.
Right.
Someone has lied to me. So much
Right,
so
right.
that when someone in Nigeria is having a conversation with you, you cannot even see it anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Because
that
you're
was
so,
it was jarring.
Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you're so far from it, where it's like you've educated yourself so much on it,
Right.
And so much about the culture itself too,
Yep.
right? Where
Yep.
now you're just like, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. No, they do not complete their sentences. Yes, if I'm talking
Right.
to you as my friend,
Right.
the same way I will speak Pidgin English to you.
It's the same
It's
thing.
the same
exactly.
way, and then if I'm in a professional setting,
Yep.
there's a
I
way
change
that
the way
will
I speak. Exactly. Code
And it's
switching.
okay,
we
like-
all do it. Same
And
way
it's
when I'm
okay.
talking to Jubilee off camera, you people probably don't even understand what we're saying because we're so expressive the way we talk. But when we're on camera, we're aware that we have an audience, so we speak a different way. It's as simple as that, you know.
But not even just
But yeah.
that, even one-on-one with someone, right? It's like, if I don't
Right.
really know you like that, I'm not
Yes.
gonna be like,
True. True.
You know what I mean? It won't be that way. It will just be very different. So I think that it comes from that. Now, the only thing that I cannot speak about is I don't know and that would have been such a good perspective to get. I don't know what the African American person's perspective before truly being exposed to a lot of this information or interactions with like Africans, right? On that level. Like like growing up, right? What was the impression? Like what were you told? What were you sold? Because we were sold a whole different thing. And this is why this has trickled down to what it is. And thank God again for technology that we're beginning to learn so much, right? And I even think like to the person that you were talking to in Nigeria, in this day and age, you cannot really... You can't really speak like that because information is just kind of there. Right. It's like, if you have a question and something doesn't sit right with you, honestly, if you actually do the research, you will find the answer that you're looking for. You don't even have to go look for anybody anymore.
In this age of ChatGPT, what's your excuse?
Do you know what I mean? Exactly. So do you know what I mean? Right. You can really learn about the people because one thing that we've come to learn and we're beginning to see every single day is that people are not who we're told they were. Right. And people are not who they seem to be, right? There's so many different truths that have not been shared with the rest of the world. And it's time to like really just educate yourself so that way because educating yourself is so powerful because now you know. And now nobody can come and lie in your face. The reason why right now people are resisting Donald Trump, for example, is because people are now educated. People now know. You cannot just throw information in front of people like before or throw like graphs and then we all believe, well, except you're watching Fox News or you belong to the demographic that he's chasing, which is also the uneducated. And that's the reason why they want to keep them that way, is that you go and Google that information. Is that true? Get your sources. Because if I'm talking to you and you're telling me, well, that's what everybody says, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Because I know that the debate is gonna go nowhere. I know that whatever conversation we're having is gonna lead nowhere because you don't even have the right information. So as a Nigerian, that's just my perspective on like
I hear
why. You know what I mean?
I hear you. The question that comes to mind, though, and again, I'm so far away from my level of experience and knowledge while I was growing up in Nigeria that I can't even relate with that perspective anymore. If that perspective ever existed, I don't even know. I can't even remember. I know I had some problematic views, but black people as the gangs, I don't know if that was it. I don't know if that was it, which is why like I was shocked when that guy asked me that question. Mind you, this was like 2 years after I'd moved to the US. I was shocked. I was like, we don't like y'all? Like, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? But anyways, the reason why I bring that up is that is there something to be said for us having to learn, like when I say us, I mean African-born people who then moved to the United States. Is there something to be said for us having to learn fast for survival? You know what I mean? Because an African living in Africa isn't surrounded by the societal, socio-economic, racial climate that we're surrounded by here. And here it's very amplified, right? Okay. It's very amplified to the point where, and then, of course, who do we identify as? A cop is not going to ask you if you're African-American or African if he stops you in your car. So then we start to, and you and I have talked about this briefly before, and we did say when we were talking about that, we'll have a whole episode dedicated to it. It is only after moving here we actually start to see ourselves as black people in that sense of separation, like a different group of people, because all we're surrounded by when we're back home is other black people. So within that context, and again, I have to preface this by saying that doesn't mean we don't think we're black people. Because I've heard in African American circles where they say, oh, you guys don't think you're black people. I'm like, no, that doesn't mean we don't think we're black people. What we're saying is when everything you're surrounded by is black people, there is no relevance to your blackness.
That's not even your first sense of identity.
Right. Like
you're thinking more male, female.
You're thinking male, female, thinking ethnic groups. So back home where we come from, you're thinking more ethnic groups. So back home in Nigeria, I'm an Igbo girl. That's my ethnic group. I'm not thinking I'm a black girl because all we're surrounded by is majority blackness, And so again, that's why I say I want to create that difference. So I don't know who's been having conversations with whom, but that doesn't mean we don't see ourselves, we don't think we're black. It just means we don't That's not the identity we think about because that's all we're surrounded by. However, when
imagine
we
going
move
into a
here,
room and say, "Oh, the black girl."
right?
Nigeria. Everybody's
which
gonna
one?
be looking at you. Which
You know what I
one?
mean? Which one? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so,
So,
yeah, I get
so
I
that's
get what
it.
you mean in that sense.
That's the difference. It's like there's a nuance there, but that's the difference. But then when we move here, that's when we really begin to see ourselves in the context of our blackness. Because, especially in the US, because of what we're surrounded by, right? So is there something to be said? And again, speaking of the difference in, you talked about Googling and all that, but I think there's still a difference where you have to learn something because you think you need it to survive, versus you have to learn something just to have the knowledge. And I think when we move here, that's when it starts to dawn on us that sometimes it's a matter of survival, especially when you hear stories of black people getting gunned down, getting mistreated by the cops. It becomes a matter of survival to actually learn the history and all that stuff, right? Versus if you're just a curious African person living in Africa. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that gap can be closed just by a few Googles. Like there's a difference between intellectual knowledge and emotional knowledge, which I feel is what we get when we move here and start to see the things that are happening around us. It goes beyond intellectual knowledge to like there's an emotional response we have to what's happening, right? And that's what informs the way we view ourselves going forward. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah. Right?
I feel like every time you come to me, I'm like,
no, I hear you. I get you.
There's also yes, and yes, but also I can point you to Africans who have moved here and have not done anything, because there's curiosity too, right? There's curiosity that comes into play, like, hey, I want to know more about this because somebody is getting gunned down. I'll give you an example, right? And unfortunately, the best example I can give is politics. I'm so sorry, but
it's like what we're talking about is political. So yeah,
it's like when people were voting, right?
Yeah.
It's like when people were voting, for example, like it's in the Hispanic community. I want to give that as an example. I really do, because they're the ones who are facing a lot of the mass deportation. So in the Hispanic community, they felt like they were not going to get deported or they were not going to be affected because they voted for Donald Trump. Not in their minds, they've been here for over 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm American. And even though you had a green card,
they fell for the okie doke.
No, but not just that. So like, we're not those Mexicans.
Yeah.
We're not those Hispanic people.
We're not those kinds of people.
We're not the same.
Yep, I heard someone say on the news, oh, he's not going to deport those who adhere to traditional family values. Okay. I was just like, okay, sir.
But when the time came to deport,
they were not asking if you have. They were not asking if you have traditional family values or not.
No, but they didn't even ask you who you voted for. Like that was not even the first question on the list. And things like that. So that's the thing that I think that also, it's like even the Africans who have come here, right?
Yeah.
It's like now you know the truth, but instead of you to dig into like the curiosity of like, okay, I see, like I've seen African Americans and they're very different people, they're not what I've been told before. Let me do some more research on that. No, they still come with that mindset of like, yeah, but I'm African and so I'm better than you. No matter
I'm
what
different.
it is. I'm always better because so they have that same mentality, right? And then they stick with it. And that's where really the gap starts to like happen in that sense.
Yeah.
Because if you come here, like for me, when I first, like I said, I don't think I've had co-workers and I've worked with a lot of, don't get me wrong, I've worked with a lot of African Americans in my day-to-day and lovely. I loved it. And I've been curious enough to even ask questions, right? Yeah. It's like when they talk about, because sometimes it's like, the George Floyd situation, I had enough information, but Mike still Brown. Not enough. And still asking those conversations like, why is it this way? Why is it felt this way? And these things are being answered to me. There's so many cases that I wasn't even aware of that had happened, right? In the past. But I wasn't aware of it because I couldn't find any information on that. And then they directed me where I could. And the moment they directed me where I need to get it, I read
Yeah.
more on it, and I started to have an understanding of, oh, okay, you know what? I get it now. I get why
Yeah.
this is this way. I get why that's that way.
Yeah.
So there has to be some level of curiosity, if you ask
Right.
me, that makes someone feel like, I want to learn more about these people.
Yeah.
I want to learn
Yeah.
more about this culture. I want to
Yeah.
learn more about this. So I think that, I don't know. I don't know how to say it, because I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual. And the reason why I say it comes down to the individual is because, one, you have to even believe or agree. Agree that you do not have full understanding of a situation, to be curious about it. And then you have to then accept that you're not fully aware of something, to do the research on it, to learn more, right? To be curious enough to be like, okay, I'm curious. I want to learn more about it. But if you come here and you're hanging out and still having the same conversations with the same group of people, and you're not opening up your cycle, it's the same thing that we talk about, like when we say people need to travel more, because you need to be exposed to more cultures,
Different
so that we have a better
cultures.
understanding of different parts of the world, because America is not just the world. Like, it's a tiny bit of the world, not the whole world, you know? So it's like, it's just like those things. So I think that, there's a part of me that feels like it's the individual. During the first time Trump was running, someone once said to me, oh my God, yes, we need him because he needs to take out the illegals. And the person turns to me and says to me, but not you, Jubilee.
You're different.
Not you.
You're different.
And then I'm just like,
my version of that was, you know, someone saying something racist and then going, you're different though. You're not. And at the time, I was too green here to really understand the racial enormity of what had just happened. Of what had just happened to me, you know? But yeah, I've experienced that. So yeah, so it's like, honestly, right now, I've forgotten why we even started talking about that. But I'm like, is there something to be said for the validity of that weaponization of the knowledge gap between the two, right? Of the fact that sometimes people actually weaponize this division, and maybe possibly in some situations give African born people, opportunities that they would typically deny African-American people, you know? Is there something to be said for that? Yeah.
I don't know. The reason why I say that is because, first of all, nothing should be weaponized. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
That's typically, like, it should not just be that way in that sense, because if we start to realize that at the end of the day, the system is trying to pit us against each other, no matter how we look at it, whether white against black, and because the truth at the end of the day is that we can talk about like colonialism, we can talk about slavery, we can talk about all of that, and yes, there still are white people, or like white supremacists, who are literally trying to still exist in this world and trying to make sure that they remain the oppressors in this world, right? But it doesn't mean that there's no other group of white people who have done the work on themselves, meaning they've educated themselves and they now understand the roles of their ancestors in this, in all of this, and every day are doing everything to make sure that they stand in that gap, if that makes sense. And the same thing too. So it's like, for me, it's like, it still comes back down to, I don't know, like, to some degree, man, you gotta educate yourself, because no longer am I in the era of sitting down and trying to figure out for you if you're racist or you're not. If you give me the sense of racism,
if you're
I don't need to come back.
Or whatever.
Yes, I don't need to come back to you to try to understand that. Everything else that comes out of your mouth means nothing to me and holds no value at all in that sense, right? So we no longer need to tiptoe around people and pretend like, oh yeah. No. Like when someone says something, and that's why I love the internet now. When someone says something, you're held accountable for it. Like, you cannot just say something and then expect to just walk away, not saying it. So when you ask that question, it's like, it's so tough because there's no yes and no.
I hear you.
You know what I mean?
And now, I hear you. And now I remember why we were talking about that. We're talking about empathy.
Yes.
We're talking about empathy, the value of empathy. Because it's one thing to learn psychopaths have a lot of knowledge, right? But they weaponize that knowledge against people.
Yes.
So it's one thing to learn, but then how you choose to use that knowledge is up to you.
Absolutely.
Because you could either use that knowledge to go, it's going to benefit me and mine. I don't care how much I know. As long as I'm winning, I'm fine. I don't care how much you're losing. Or you could use that knowledge to try and bridge a gap. Right, which is what we're trying to do here. Yeah. So that's where that empathy, I think, comes in on a case by case. Or you could do nothing with it, on a case by case basis. So so now that said, like, it really, like, whenever I see these diaspora wars break out, whether it's South Africa versus Nigeria, whether it's intra-country, intra-African, whenever I see breakout, I just say, we're all suffering from the same trauma. And you hit on it when you said, like, realizing that these are just weapons of division. And a lot of people are falling for the okie doke. A lot of people fall for it.
And they're not going to stop.
And they're not going to stop. It's like, y'all are falling for the okie doke. Like, these are just weapons of division. Because the same source is the same source that's pitting us against each other. Like I said, the same media that will portray Africans as poor and disease-ridden, to the point where African Americans call Africans African booty scratchers, is the same media that will portray African Americans back home in Africa as gangsters and people, same media machine.
It's the same playbook, because when you think about it too, let's take it back home to Nigeria, for example.
Yeah, right?
This is why they create ethnic fights, ethnic wars between people. Oh, the Hausa man is not better than you. He's lower than you. Oh, the Igbo man is better than... These are the things, and this is why, because the more united you are, you can defeat them.
Right. 100%. Yeah. So to that point,
somewhere, I think the world population, if I'm not mistaken, either 14% of the world population or 7%. I could be so wrong, but it's such a low number are white people.
That makes you think. Right? But honestly, I feel like a lot of times we give our power away to them.
No, of course.
Right?
But then also, that's mental slavery, right? Because there's that brainwash. That's
mental slavery, yes.
Because it's like...
There's that brainwashing. Yep. Using the media, like you said, like, I love that line. America is a PR project. Because I've always thought about it that way. It's just talk. It's marketing. We learned this stuff in school. And everything is a part of that machine. Including
just
Hollywood.
So you know, you call 911, they're not there immediately. Already are showing you on the
Hollywood is a huge part of that machine.
Yes.
There was a time my sister had an incident with an Uber driver, and we went to the LAPD to report what had happened. So the man told us that he can't do anything because nothing was done to my sister. She's still okay. So I said, it's when something happens to her. Now you would do something. So what is the purpose of police? The way they will portray police in the movies, though, they will take notes. They will start investigating, trying to look for those people. It's wash, my African people. Now wash. It's wash. That's not the way it works.
Long list of people.
Right. And even subtle things like when you're watching a movie and someone's like, the American passport is the most powerful passport in the world.
No, it's not.
Economically speaking, the access it gives you, we hear. But again, like you were talking about,
down to access though, because there's stronger European passports.
No, but you were talking about mental brainwashing. That's what I'm saying. Those are the lines that they're using to brainwash you. That's what they're using to brainwash people.
Because look at me, I was already ready to argue.
You're already like, they're stronger passports. You're right. There are stronger passports. But Hollywood is a part of the machine.
No,
you know? Right. So beware. So
why
anyways,
do we move here to go to school? It's part of the machine.
It's part of the machine. They say, it's funny because
they get it right sometimes. Let's not lie. They do get it right sometimes. There are certain schools that are here that they're worth every penny for you to go.
Oh yeah, USC. I had a ball.
Because it's absolutely worth it. It opens your world. It opens the opportunities, the American dream itself. Those things are realistic. That's the truth, right? But then it's like there's some things that are just not. You know, like the credit card, you just walk into the store and just slash. That's not how it works. Slash your credit card. The collectors are going to be waiting for you at the door.
I'm telling you, I feel like don't pay it
with interest too.
That thing can easily ruin your life.
You know, so there's so many things. There's so many little things here and there.
Yep.
Look,
100%.
We gonna survive.
We are in it. We are in it. We're not only gonna survive, we're gonna thrive. So to wrap this up.
Thrive. Okay, go ahead.
We're not only gonna survive. Yes, we're not only gonna survive, we're gonna thrive. We're gonna thrive. We are thriving. We are thriving. But to wrap this up, in addition to what we're doing now, what are some things that we can continue to do to bridge that gap? Because to me, again, like I said, when I see these Diaspora Wars break out, people calling themselves names, I'm just like, we're just all suffering from the same trauma. So there's that empathetic part of me that's like, why? You know? So what are some things we can continue to do to try to bridge that gap in understanding between ourselves?
These conversations. Like, look at the conversation that you and I are having today. One, it's opened my eyes, to realize like, oh, okay, there's more, because when you share the story of you talking to your friend back in Nigeria, it helps me understand like, oh, okay, there's more people that are not, enlightened with this kind of stuff, right? In that sense. So it's like, it's those conversations, like you talk about it, people start to ask questions, people watch the show, people listen to the podcast, and then people are curious, right? People are curious about more, people are curious about this, and then it leads to even more conversations, because truly, right? For example, like you guys can put in the comment section your experience, like, or what you've been exposed to, or what your take is on this. Like, especially some of the questions, because Cynthia asked some really great questions that we're able to like just dive into. Like people writing there, like, what's your experience? What has been your experience so far? And what's something that you wish you knew actually? What's something that you actually wish you knew? Like, oh wow, like I didn't even know that, or I didn't even know that until I heard this now from you guys, because it'll be good, because the more we start to understand everyone's way of thinking, it's easier to empathize. It's easier to be like, oh no, you know what, let me tell you, this is usually how we see things this way, and it really helps bridge the gap. So just let us know also in the comment section, like, what's been your experience, like, just so we know, and that way, it will just really lead to a great conversation.
100%. Same way you said I had a lot of good questions. She had a lot of great counters, right? As you were countering, I was like, yeah. So, and that's why I love having this, like you said, having conversations like this, because, again, as much as you know, right? And it's important to talk to other people, bounce what you know off of other people, and that just like opens up your world. And honestly, sometimes it's not like you don't even know certain things, but until someone throws it back at you, it doesn't strike you. It doesn't strike you. You know what I mean? There are all these moments, like light bulb moments, where it's like, whoa, So I've had a wonderful conversation. Like Jubilee said, to me, like I said, for me, the importance was giving this topic the sensitivity it requires, and I hope we've been able to achieve that. Like Jubilee said, share your experiences in the comments. And that's it on my end. I think you wrapped it up beautifully. I don't have anything else to add. This has been another wonderful, beautiful episode of the Two Naija Girls podcast. I'm one Naija girl, Cynthia, and we have our other Naija girl,
Jubilee Maniel. Hello.
We will see you all on the next episode.
We'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.